about to listen to the Dr. Daliah Show. Sassy, stimulating medical talk radio. Any medical advice Dr. Daliah Wax gives on her show should not be substituted for an actual visit to your medical provider. And now, here's Dr. Daliah.
All right. We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-Dr. 1-877-DOC-DALI. So I'm seeing a lot of articles talking about how bad, not good, but how bad donating clothes to a charity can be. Now, this is kind of concerning because I want to encourage people to donate. We buy a lot of ridiculous things online. I mean, we just had Prime Day. Now, I could use a new one of these. I could use a new one of these. And then people have closets full of clothes. See, I have a lot of skinny clothes that I'm still holding on to from high school and college because I just don't like to throw anything out because I spent a lot of money on those. Not that they were expensive. It's just I didn't have a lot of money. And so for me, pulling $10 or $15 together was a lot. I just can't throw it away. But it's old. It's out of style. Nobody wants to be wearing something from the 90s or the 80s. So I keep them. And closet's overflowing. I got to donate them. But I'm hearing under the cool down, nonprofit issues warning after collecting staggering mountain of discarded clothing. Apparently, this was in Hong Kong. They were looking at the clothing, and they believe that people throw out 443 tons each day. And they're concerned about, the waste of textiles. I'm looking at an article here saying, talking about Goodwill. 9 ways donating clothes to Goodwill does more harm than good. Now, I don't know if Goodwill got to share their opinion because Goodwill, I think, likes getting the donations. But this comes from an article, Style on Maine. 9 ways donating clothes to Goodwill does more harm than good. So they basically talk about how it could hurt the environment. How if Goodwill or these charities can't use it, and this isn't me reporting. I think Goodwill, can definitely use your donations. And unless they say differently, still continue to donate. But according to this article, if they can't use it, they throw it out and it causes overwhelming landfills. Well, your landfill will overwhelm whether you donate it or throw it out. It says it's undermining local economies. Because if people are using the cheaper clothes that they're getting from Goodwill, they aren't buying the clothes from the stores that are more expensive. And then overseas, in regions like East Africa, they say, it's led to a collapse of the domestic garment production. There's unemployment, economic stability, because we donate here, it goes to Africa, and people could use cheaper clothes, so the local areas aren't selling. I didn't know that. Again, I can't verify if that's really the case. Is your donation in the Goodwill bin really causing East African textile industry to go under? I don't know. They're saying the donation process has a lot of hidden environmental costs to transport the clothes, greenhouse gas emissions, cleaning the clothes. They say it's a financial strain on charities because they have to go through the clothes, clean them, process them, sort them, transport them. Again, I haven't heard any charities complain. They say it encourages overconsumption. It encourages us overbuying because we could donate them. I'm really confused by this article. They also say we're exploiting developing nations because we're giving them our secondhand clothing. They can't produce their own garments. And they're saying our quality of donations is getting worse. We're using these charities as our sanitation department. Rather than throwing out a piece of clothing with holes in it that's old, we're giving it to Goodwill, and now they have to spend money addressing it. Like I said, I haven't heard from Goodwill personally on this. I really do think that Goodwill is very open to getting donations. So I'm confused by this article. But one thing that I think charities do want is money donated as opposed to regular goods. And I'm not speaking on any particular charity, but when Superstorm Sandy happened, my son was working on a project to get donations, and a bunch of people were donating goods, truckloads. So when we asked, where in New York and New Jersey we could send them, they said, don't be sending just send us money. I'm like, but you don't understand. We're in a great recession. We have a lot of people here that have, don't have money, but they have things to donate. They're like, we don't want them. Give them to your local charity. And so that's kind of frustrating. Now we have victims of the Texas floods. Death toll over 120. A good number of them children. People in Texas are going to need help. And there's, Red Cross, Vitalent, Donate Blood, World Central Kitchen. So there's a lot of charities, good Salvation Army, Goodwill. Call your local Goodwill or the national and find out what is the best way to help. But I do notice the majority of them are asking for money. It seems to be the easiest on the environment. It seems to be the easiest on their staff, on there. But the problem is a lot of people then don't donate. And so one thing you could do if you're running into the same situation that I did, where when there's a charity and I'm trying to hold a collection and people say, no, just send us money. One thing you could do is do a garage sale or a yard sale where you sell your stuff and then send the money and say, look, this money is going to Red Cross or this money is going to Goodwill or whatever. Reach out to Goodwill because Goodwill does sell. It's a fantastic concept where donated goods are sold and that money goes to help, people in your community. I think it's fantastic. But there's this big disconnect on donating where now it's just give us money. And you have a lot of people that don't have money, but they want to help. Now they could volunteer. Red Cross is fantastic with that. They go, look, we need volunteers. So Salvation Army, there's a lot of places that could use you for volunteering. But, a lot of us overbuy now because of Amazon and all that. And so what do you do with those? So contact your local charity or local church, temple, because sometimes they could use that for individuals. 1-877 Doc Daliah.
This is an urgent announcement for anyone that's $10,000 or more in debt. Before you make another minimum payment, you need to know there are special programs that can completely free you of your debt. Total Financial Freedom can help you become debt-free in months instead of years. Resolve your credit card debt, signature loans, department store cards, internet loans, and timeshares. Call Total Financial Freedom now at 800-878-6020 for a free consultation. For 16 years, Total Financial Freedom has helped thousands get out of debt. You can feel confident when calling because Total Financial Freedom is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. Battling for years and years stuck in the endless cycle of minimum payments could take decades. You have the right to get your debt resolved and substantially reduce your monthly payments. Call Total Financial Freedom now at 800-878-6020. That's 800-878-6020. 800-878-6020.
Hi, guys. Dr. Daliah here. Addictions can sneak up on us and come in many forms, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, video games, porn, or something less obvious, such as food, internet, or shopping. Addiction can seem innocent at first and then evolve into an insurmountable evil. In our book, Addiction Basics, Caitlin Kalikas and I dive into the common addictions and provide tips for identifying and preventing these before they sneak in and take over our lives. Addiction Basics can be found on Amazon or my website, drdaliah.com. Check it out.
Carl Amari here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you, and be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-Doc-Dali, 1-877-DOCDALI. Big thanks to Talk Media Network for making the show happen. Big thanks to Daniel, our producer. And big thanks to you all for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X at Dr. Daliah, Facebook, The Dr. Daliah Show, and on YouTube, click like and subscribe. So how often are we supposed to be pooping a day? Now, I know it's not a very easy question to answer. People say it's none of your business. Doctors ask all the time. They should ask. Doctors should be asking about bowel habits. They should be saying, when was your last bowel movement? Do you feel you're emptying? Is it too soft? Is it just right? Are you going too often or you're not going enough? And we don't really have an exact number on how many times you should go. There's a range. Some people, they go a couple times a week, and that's normal for them, which is why a doctor will ask, do you have any change in bowel habits, as opposed to, how often are you going to the bathroom? I mean, we've had some infants and kids where they might only poop once a week. I prefer they poop more than that. I think it's a good sign if they have a regular bowel movement. I don't want them to go multiple times a day. But it seems like the magic number is 1 to 2. 1 to 2 times a day. And in this latest study, 2. Study published in July 2024 looked at 1,425 people and how often they went number 2. Look out for number 1, but don't step in number 2. Rodney Dangerfield. And the healthiest participants reported pooping once or twice a day. The Goldilocks zone of bowel movement frequency. They say the study shows how bowel movement frequency can influence all body systems. This is being reported by Science Alert, and how aberrant bowel movement frequency may be an important risk factor in the development of chronic diseases. This according to University of Washington microbiologist Sean Gibbons. He was one of the authors. They go, these insights should inform strategies for managing bowel movement frequency, even in healthy populations, to optimize health and wellness. So the study was led by a team from the Institutes for Systems Biology. They investigated the bathroom habits of people who are generally healthy, no history of kidney or gut issues like kidney disease or irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's, and they self-reported how many times they dropped the kids off at the pool. And they organized them into 4 categories. Constipation for those reporting 1 or 2 bowel movements per week, low normal for 3 to 6 movements per week, high normal for those having 1 to 3 movements per day, and diarrhea if you've had 4 or more watery stools per day. Then they looked at the patient's blood chemistry and metabolites and genetics and gut microbiomes, etc. And then they wanted to see the association between people going regularly versus not. And they say those who reported less frequent bowel movements tended to be women, younger, with the lower body mass index. People with constipation or diarrhea showed clear links to underlying health issues. They said bacteria usually found in the upper GI were more common in stool samples from participants with diarrhea. Their blood samples showed biomarkers associated with liver damage. Stool samples from people with less frequent bowel movements had higher levels of bacteria associated with protein fermentation, which is a hazard from constipation. And that could also affect their bloodstream. There was a metabolite called indoxysulfate, which is a known product of protein fermentation that could damage the kidneys. So constipation, which we've talked about on the show, kidney damage, depending on your body absorbing the chemicals from old stool. Now, I don't want to scare you. A lot of you have bad bowel habits, and it's because of how you eat, and it's because of your sitting. If you're eating a lot of cheese, cheese gums things up. If you're eating a lot of processed food and not a lot of fiber, a stool's going to sit. And then if you're sitting, you're not moving. If you're not passing gas, if you're not staying active. I am noticing a huge uptick in rectal prolapses. This weekend, I had 2 patients call in with rectal prolapse. And that's a lot for a weekend. 2 calling in. And rectal prolapse is where you lose part of your rectum. Why? Well, it was a few days between their last bowel movement. They went to the bathroom, tried to push it out, and they lost part of their rectum. That's a surgical emergency. You need to get that surgically fixed right away. and it's very painful. And so we need to really concentrate on how to make sure our bowels are regular. And it's not healthy. In fact, colon cancer risk, we're seeing a rise in colon cancer. I've said this time and time again, the longer your stool sits with all the chemicals in the food and nitrates and nitrites and all the other stuff that we have, that can affect the lining. Your body was not designed to have stools sit there for days on end. But we also don't want diarrhea. The whole purpose of the colon is to collect the water. You eat your food, it goes through your esophagus, the stomach starts to acidify and dissolve. Actually, dissolving digestion starts in the mouth. Actually, it starts with your fork and knife, but saliva starts to dissolve it. But your stomach acid dissolves it even more. Now it becomes a mush that your small intestine could absorb all the important nutrients and sugars and carbohydrates and proteins. And then what's left goes into the colon, and then your colon is supposed to churn and collect the water from your food. When you have diarrhea, there's no time for the colon to do its job, and it just comes out. If you have constipation, the longer the stool is there, the more that bowel is churning and trying to squeeze out fluid. So now it's getting harder and harder and drier. So you need to have a balance. It has to be the Goldilocks, where it's just right. The stool needs to be in there a proper amount of time. There needs to be a steady flow. Gas expulsion will help the mass movements, so the bowels move, which is why don't hold it in, let it out. Maybe not in front of other people or in an elevator, but go outside, get to your car, whatever. Make sure you don't shart. We talked about that. Okay? Make sure, maybe go to a bathroom to let it out. This way you're safe and you don't mess up your clothes. But your colon is a very important organ, so we don't want any of it missing or falling out, and we don't want it getting cancer. And so fiber helps improve the bulk, improve the water absorption, because your body wants there to be water content in the stool. Drinking water. A lot of us are constipated because we don't drink enough water. We might be drinking diet soda. So cause of constipation is lack of water, lack of fiber, eating cheese, dairy, fat, gluten, meat. Heavy meat diets are harder to churn and digest. Caffeine, hypothyroidism could cause constipation, stress, lack of exercise, frequent sitting, pregnancy, hormone fluctuations, irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, cancer if you have a mass. If you are always using laxatives, that could also make you more prone. So there's laxatives and stool softeners. Stool softeners soften the stool so your body could push it out. Laxatives are for people who can't push the stool. A lot of you are doing it wrong. You're constipated, so you might start using laxatives and your stool is too hard and then it starts to hurt. So you need to identify, do you need a stool softener or do you need a laxative? Are you constipated because the stool is too hard and you need to soften it first? Or are you constipated because the stool is soft but your bowel isn't moving? Either way, a medical provider should figure out what the hell is going on. If you have an eating disorder, or if you decide to, let's say, intermittent fast, where you eat absolutely nothing for hours, and then all of a sudden you take in a big meal, which intermittent fasting doesn't really tell you to eat big, large meals. They want you to eat steadily. Well, now your body doesn't have a nice rhythmic cycle. It's trying to deal with too much food at once. Medications can cause constipation, narcotics, antidepressants, iron supplements. So we want to make sure that we are minimizing your constipation. So cut out the cheese, cut the cheese, all right? Drink more water, get up, move. If you have to sit at a desk, get a stand-up desk or stand up every few minutes to stretch. Your boss won't get mad. They'll get mad if you're always going to the lounge and you're always talking at other people's desks. But if you're standing up, stretching, and you're still kind of working on your computer or you're on your phone, you could stand to be on the phone. You don't necessarily have to be always sitting, but you have to stand and move. And if you are noticing you're starting to get constipated, talk to your medical provider about that. Also, relax. A lot of times we rush. We sleep in, and we're trying to rush to do whatever we need to because we have to be somewhere. Try to get on a regular cycle where you can have your bowel movements at a certain time of day that allows you to relax. Twice a day, I think, is good because of the amount of food you eat and it keeps things open and moving and fresh. But even if it's once a day, I think that's fine. Once every 2 days, could be starting to push it. But when you look at these studies and they go, well, people who are very constipated or have diarrhea have other health issues. Well, it could be because of what they're eating, or it could be what they're exposed to. So get on a good bowel plan. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY. Don't go away.
At Hot Shot Secret, we share the science behind common diesel problems and their solutions. For example,
Diesel fuel cetane levels.
in many states, the cetane rating in diesel fuel is 42 to 45. Most diesel engines operate more efficiently with a cetane rating of 48 to 50. One treatment of Hot Shot Secret Diesel Extreme will raise your cetane 7 points, increase fuel economy, and improve cold starts. Due to a cleaner burn, there are less hydrocarbons and particulate matter in your exhaust. This reduces the blockage of your diesel particulate filter. Using Diesel Extreme generates 83% less DPF regeneration. The 6-in-1 Diesel Extreme formula also includes the most concentrated detergent on the market, lubricity enhancer, water demulsifier, rust and corrosion inhibitors, and a fuel stabilizer.
Hot Shot Secret Diesel Extreme is available nationwide at truck stops, fine farm and auto stores, and online at hotshotsecret.com. Hot Shot Secret, powered by science.
All right. We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY, 1-877-DOC-DALI. So when this country had the horrible, horrible actions as it pertained to slavery, and we finally freed slaves, which should have never happened in this country, but in terms of having slavery, the 14th Amendment allowed individuals born to slaves to be automatic citizens. And the which we agree with the birthright citizenship for people who were abducted, taken here, forced to be slaves, now free, or even while they were in slavery, their babies are American. They were born here. And the 14th Amendment did that to protect those individuals who now were free, able to start a family and a free life. And so bipartisanly, very popular, understandable. Over the last few decades, though, the birthright citizenship has taken a different turn. And there are many individuals who really, really want the U.S. citizenship status because of all the, goodies that come with it. And I don't blame people for wanting to become an American citizen. I don't blame them. It's one of the best countries in the world. But individuals are flocking to this country hours before, able to give birth. There's even tourism that will fly you in your third trimester so you could give birth here in America, and then the child be an American citizen. And it's taken a different turn. The Trump administration wants birthright citizenship to be limited to those who have at least one parent who is a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. The order will deny citizenship to children whose mothers are temporarily in the United States, like those visiting or those who are doing the tourism where they're being flown in, they pay to fly in and then come here and then have the baby here. So the order will deny citizenship to those moms, including those visiting under the visa waiver program or as tourists, or who are students and whose fathers are not citizens or lawful permanent residents. So Trump is starting to limit birthright citizenship. And I want to hear from you guys how you feel about that. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY, 1-877-DOC-DALI. And the issue that America is having, what prompted this, was the massive immigration. If Biden didn't have such a porous border, and we didn't have millions upon millions and millions of people trying to come in, many gotaways, many people illegal. The birthright citizenship wasn't really brought up in the first trimester, but somebody woke up the sleeping giant. And now people are looking at, what do we do so millions of people don't want to come here? We want to help people, but we can't take the world. And there are many countries, especially third world countries, where people want to make it to America and be here. I don't blame them. America is the greatest country ever. But there has to be a process. And so this is what's coming from Trump. From the other side, they're saying, no, it's unconstitutional. American Civil Liberties Union has argued in front of the U.S. District Judge, I think Joseph LaPlante, and we are being told that a judge is now blocking Trump's order restricting the birthright citizenship. So they have granted a temporary block of the block, so it's a double negative, so that individuals could still be able to have their babies born here as American citizens. The lawsuit was brought on behalf of a pregnant immigrant parents, and their infants. And they sought class action status for all babies around the country who would be affected by Trump's executive order. Now, I don't know if these are illegal immigrants or legal immigrants. But legal immigrants have that protection. But what about illegal immigrants? So you see, this wasn't an issue before. It was really tough to get into America before. You had to go through Ellis Island. The border, there were people that snuck over, but it was a lot more difficult for you to be illegal. So this wasn't as much of an issue. You were a legal immigrant. You came here. You gave birth. Baby's now a U.S. citizen. There was a process. But things are different now that we have many people that came across illegally. You never had to, that is a question. Does an illegal immigrant who sneaks over the border get that baby U.S. citizenship? Up until now, the answer was yes, because it was so rare. Well, up until the Biden administration. Now with the Biden administration, we're looking at possibly millions. So what's the next step? Now, I'm mixed because it's not the baby's fault. And for a pregnant woman to go through all that, for their baby to be safe. I mean, the mom is doing it for the baby. But when you have individuals that snuck over, now they're rushing to get a baby so that that baby can anchor them, called anchor babies. I'm not surprised that the Trump administration wants to start to limit that. And it is okay to make amendments if it's voted on by Congress to a previous amendment that was made for a different issue. We wanted to help slave families become American citizens, get the same rights as everybody else after their rights were horribly taken from them. And they went through awful, awful trauma and torture being slaves. But this is different. If people sneak across a border, does their baby, if they were able to do that and outsmart Border Patrol and the president, whatever, they were able to get through, does their baby get to be an American citizen? And now do they get to be here as that anchor? We do have a big country, but we don't have enough funds. Look at what's been happening to hospitals in Yuma, Denver. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Who pays for this baby to be born? Who pays for the mom's medical care? If they are legal, undergoing the process, there's a process. But if they're illegal, where does the money come from? And as a doctor, I want any pregnant woman, I don't care what country you're from, to get assistance. But what do we do if the money runs out? If money is running out, we have to alter the rules. Now, we see the government always alter the rules of Medicare. Well, we're not going to cover this anymore. We're not going to cover this. We're not going to cover dental. We're not going to cover this. Rules always change with everything else, but you ask for us to tighten up some rules as it pertains to immigration, as it pertains to government funding, as it pertains to illegal immigrants, birthright citizenship. Everybody has a cow. So we have some work to do. And when we have American citizens struggling to get a hospital bed, I believe it was Mesquite, I think, had to close their maternity ward in Southern Nevada due to funding. When you have Americans having to travel now an hour and a half to 2 hours to give birth, maybe we need to build up our hospital infrastructure. Maybe we need to take care of our own first before we promise everybody that we're going to take care of them. I want to take care of everybody, but we're not built for that yet. We're very weak. I'm hearing more and more Americans are giving birth at home. Now, a home birth is nice, it's intimate, but how safe is that? My children would have died if I gave birth at home. Thank God I was at a hospital. 1-877 Doc Daliah.
Carl Amari here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you, and be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
Have you ever thought you'd like to buy and sell houses but didn't know how or where to get the money? My name is Ron LeGrand, and over the past 40 years, I've bought over 3,000 houses without using my money or credit, and taught thousands to do the same. Today, even in a virtual environment, we buy nice houses in nice neighborhoods using no banks, realtors, contractors, or other costly entanglements, and build huge cash flow and wealth without the hassle of tenants, all without credit and little or no money. You don't need a license or experience, and I'll show you exactly how it's done. Text FREE to 99799, and I'll send you my free training. I promise you I'll change the way you think about real estate and open the door to a new lifestyle that doesn't involve risk or rehabs and can quickly replace your current income. Text FREE to 99799 and let me show you how to take your life back and build cash flow and wealth from your home. That's FREE to 99799. Again, FREE to 99799.
Dr. Daliah here. Are you tired, burned out, gaining weight, succumbing to the daily pressures of life? Well, how's your dopamine doing? How you feel right now, how you'll feel an hour from now, and how you'll feel next week is completely reliant on your dopamine. Our daily motivation and willingness to push through challenges depends on the intricate chemical process dopamine provides. Christian Kalikas and I created Deploying Dopamine, a book that tells you what dopamine is, when it dysfunctions, and how to successfully deploy it when needed. Find Deploying Dopamine on Amazon today. Check it out. We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-Dr. Dali, 1-877-DOC-DALI. So I had to go to medical school, borrow $80,000. And that was the barest minimum. Why? Because in undergrad, I worked 3 part-time jobs, so I didn't have to borrow. I also got an academic scholarship that covered my classes, but I still had to support myself, pay for books, etc. So I worked 3 part-time jobs, so I never had to borrow for undergrad. For medical school, I did have to borrow, and I borrowed $80,000, which was probably the barest minimum. That was going to medical school in the 90s. Because it was the barest minimum, and I also had to help my brother go to college and other family members, I waited tables while in medical school to make that extra money because I couldn't use my student loans to help my family. That had to go to the school. So I used my tip money and and table waiting money for that. I paid off my student loans in under 10 years. It was hard because of all the interest. And it was a pain, but understandably so. I decided to borrow a lot of money. 80 grand was a lot of money. I signed a contract, and it was my job to, with my first 100 paychecks, understand that those paychecks were going to have to pay back whom I owed. And that's kind of how loans work. Well, when COVID hit, a bunch of borrowers, understandably so, who now couldn't work, how do they pay off their student loans? So during COVID, there was a stay on interest and there was a stay on repayment. And that, I think a lot of people agreed with temporarily until we could reopen again, which we really shouldn't have closed down to the degree that we did. Some places were closed down for months or years, went out of business. We've talked about that before. The lockdowns should have been done completely differently. But once certain restrictions were lifted, all right, get back to work. Well, individuals didn't want to get back to work. You got more money from unemployment. You got an extra $600 a week. The unemployment rules changed, where now you didn't have to show that you were refused a job. You could get unemployment easier. Well, if you're unemployed, how could you be expected to pay off your loans? So there are some individuals who have not paid on their student loans or had interest in over 5 years. Now, what should you have been doing at that time? Should you have been A, waiting for Beto O'Rourke or another Democratic primary candidate to get into office, saying, I'm going to write off the student loans? Should you B, have been working and paying off your loan? Or C, should you have been saving and understanding that interest is going to start again? Now, mind you, I tell you, 5 years of no interest, very cool. Most of my home mortgage is interest. Most of my student loan payments were interest. That was really, really nice of the government. Well, instead of hearing everybody say thank you, very cool, for a 5-year reprieve, people are mad at the government. Why? Well, because the interest is starting to accrue. COVID started over 5 years ago. We believe it was in America during the late fall of 2019. Why are we still pretending it's COVID as it pertains to student loans and the money owed to the government? Now, I'm on the side of students in that I don't think most education should require people going into debt. And I think these universities are overcharging. I know they're overcharging. It's ridiculous. I've seen medical students where they owe over $500,000 each because they went to a private medical school. That's ridiculous. And so if you did want to help out these student loans, then why don't you knock off $10,000, knock off $20,000 of the money you got from the student? But no, the university's got their money, and they keep raising their tuition every year. But it's on you and I to help deal with the student loan crisis. Well, 8 million borrowers whose student loan payments have been on pause will now start to see interest accrue, according to the U.S. Department of Education. There were legal challenges that kept this in limbo. President Joe Biden had a student loan repayment plan which had issues. Interest-free forbearance, free from making payments until September 2025, debt prevented from ballooning. Well, the hiatus ends August 1. And the change is part of an effort to, get people back to normalcy after COVID. If you're going to borrow money from the government, if countries have to pay back money, if the U.S. has to pay on their loans, If you and I have to pay on our mortgage and pay on our car, what's so special about college students? Well, we felt bad for them because schools were closing, jobs. But if they borrowed the money, they have to pay it back. Or go to the university for reprieve. Don't go to the taxpayers. If you don't think your medical school should have charged you $500,000, don't get mad at Trump. Don't get mad at your neighbor or voters. Go get mad at the university. Tell them to pay down your loan. And it really frustrates me how all the energy is shifted and all the anger is shifted when I didn't tell the school to charge you that much. You know, I picked a state school. I am so glad I went to a state school. I went to the University of Nevada, Reno. I got an amazing education there. I did my last year at UCLA. Between UNR and UCLA, my education was phenomenal. But I didn't live in a home. I lived in somebody's backyard. I rented somebody's bed to sleep in, just to sleep. I lived in half a dozen places a year during my rotations to save money. My car that had no air conditioning, I was able to get a truck. I waited tables to pay that off. If I knew back then that there was going to be this possibility where I could live in a home with no roommates, get a fancy truck, go to Pepperdine, Case Western, George Washington U, borrow all this money and not have to pay, get it forbeared, low interest or no interest, I seriously doubt I would have done it different because I wouldn't have trusted that really you don't have to pay back a loan. I signed something legally. But now people are taking a look at this going, maybe I don't have to now scrimp and save and work multiple jobs. Maybe I could relax, get a very cush $2,000 a month apartment with no roommates. I could buy a car. And people are now looking at what they could use student loan money for because there's this question that it might get written off later. These student loans are allowed to be applied to housing. And when you look at people that didn't go to college, you think they're happy with this? The reason why people say, I don't understand why Biden didn't get this through, because Democrats didn't like it. If the average Democrat paid off their student loan, you think they're going to want to pay off a younger kid's student loan? So I know everybody's having a cow about this, but you know, go get mad at the university. 1-877-DOC-LA.
Can you believe, with all the recent violent protests, looting, and destruction, some areas are considering either defunding or abolishing the police? At a time when America's neighborhoods need the protection of police the most, some elected officials would rather create more chaos by playing politics. If you're sick of elected officials caving in to demands of the radical left, you're not alone. It's time we stand up and declare our support for local police. The majority of police officers are important partners in protecting our God-given rights. If you prefer freedom over chaos, then learn how you can help protect the local police that serve your community. Call today and request your free Support Your Local Police info packet. Dial 800-JBS-USA-1. That's 800-JBS-USA-1. Request your free Support Your Local Police info packet by calling 800-JBS-USA-1 today.